William Wallace went from being a simple landowner to a hero who suffered one of the most horrific executions England has ever seen. But how did the once glorious resistance fighter end up on the execution pedal? To answer that question, we have to start at the beginning. Popular legend, fueled by Hollywood and myth, paints Wallace's death as heroic martyrdom. But the truth? Far darker. King Edward I planned Wallace's death as a terrifying warning to anyone who dreamed of defiance. The punishment was horrific: hanging, drawing, and quartering. England's harshest sentence reserved for traitors. It wasn't just about killing Wallasite, it was about dismantling his dignity, body, and legacy before the eyes of the world. To understand why, we have to rewind. Late 13th century Scotland was a land torn by turmoil, caught between freedom and submission. After the death of King Alexander III and his heir, Margaret, the Maid of Norway, Scotland was plunged into a brutal succession crisis. The nobles were divided. Opportunists rose, and watching closely from the south was Edward I of England. Longshanks, a king with ambitions not just to rule, but to dominate. Edward didn't see Scotland as an equal neighbor, but as a land ripe for conquest, a rebellious province that needed to be subdued. When Scottish nobles invited Edward to arbitrate the succession, he seized his chance. He installed John Balliol as king, but only as a puppet under English overlordship. Resistance bubbled beneath the surface, and then it exploded. But why did Wallace take all of this upon himself? Wallace was not a noble, not a politician, but a minor landowner, trained in arms, driven by personal tragedy. Legend says English soldiers murdered his wife, igniting his fury. What followed was a campaign of audacious guerrilla warfare. Wallace didn't wait for noble approval. He took up arms, rallying ordinary Scots, farmers, and fighters alike. His stunning victory at Stirling Bridge in 1297 sent shockwaves through Britain. Wallace, against all odds, defeated a larger, better-equipped English force. He became Guardian of Scotlanda, leader of a nation in rebellion. But how long could one man hold a fractured nation together? To Edward, Wallace wasn't just a military threat, was a symbol, a living rejection of English dominance. Rebellion was a wildfire. And Wallace? The spark that had to be snuffed out. But was it really that easy for the Scots? The Scots were divided. Many nobles, weary of war and seduced by promises of power, swore fealty to Edward. Wallace refused. His defeat at the Battle of Falkirk in 1298 didn't destroy him, but it weakened his standing. He resigned as guardian, but never surrendered. He continued to resist, not for glory, but because submission was unthinkable. For years, he vanished from public view, operating in shadows. Some believe he traveled to France, seeking aid from King Philip IV, or even to Rome to plead Scotland's case before the Pope. Wherever he went, his mission was clear: restore Scotland's freedom by any means necessary. But how do you keep a rebellion alive when your allies have given up? In 1305, betrayal struck. Captured near Glasgow, likely sold out by John de Menteith, a fellow Scot loyal to Edward Wallace was handed over to the English. His journey south wasn't just physical, it was psychological warfare. Shackled, paraded, spat upon, he was no longer a man, but a trophy. On the 23rd of August, in the year 1305, Wallace stood trial in Westminster Hall. It was a farce, charged with Trisona cruel irony. Wallace never swore allegiance to Edward. His response, "I could not be a traitor, for I was never his subject," was a dagger in the heart of English legitimacy. But truth didn't matter, power did. The sentence was brutal: drawn through London, hanged, disemboweled alive, beheaded, and quartered. Each step was a symbol disgrace, divine rejection, spiritual defilement, and total annihilation. On that grim morning, London awoke to crowds flooding the streets, vendors selling snacks, and a scaffold looming at Smithfield. Wallace was bound to a hurdle and dragged over rough cobblestones that tore his flesh while the crowd jeered. Then, the hanging butt cut down before death. Next came the unthinkable. His abdomen slit open, his organs torn out while he remained conscious. His entrails burned before his ice on assault on his very soul. Then the executioner's blade. His head was displayed on London Bridge, tarred for preservation. His limbs were sent to Newcastle, Berwick, Perth, and Stirlingham map of fear painted in blood. But Edward miscalculated. The brutality didn't destroy Wallace's cause, it immortalized it. His torment became legend, a spark that lit future resistance. Robert the Bruce, who once wavered in his loyalties, found new fire. By 1314, Scotland triumphed at Bannockburn, a turning point born from Wallace's sacrifice. The horrors of Smithfield became sacred ground in Scottish memory. Martyrdom replaced disgrace. Did this destroy Wallace's legacy? Wallace's legacy lived on in whispers and war cries. His death shaped ideas of national identity and personal liberty, and centuries later, it fueled debates on justice, humanity, and power. His life raised a question still relevant today. What is the cost of freedom? This wasn't just the killing of a rebel. It was a message, a ritual, a political weapon disguised as justice. England claimed supremacy not only through military might, but through terror encoded into the very process of execution. But beyond the politics and bloodshed, Wallace's story taps into something universal: the human spirit's refusal to bow in the face of oppression. It reminds us that true courage is not measured by victories on the battlefield alone, but by the willingness to stand for what is right, even when the odds are crushingly against us. His legacy is a testament to resilience, a beacon for those who believe that freedom is worth any sacrifice. What makes Wallace's story truly timeless is how it reveals the complex relationship between power, violence, and memory. Edward I's cruel spectacle was meant to erase a man and intimidate a people. Instead, it engraved Wallace into the heart of Scottish identity. His death transformed from a warning into a call to arms, a vivid example of how brutality can sometimes forge unbreakable unity. And it challenges us today. How do we confront oppression in our own time? What lessons do we draw from the past? Wallace's sacrifice is not just history. It is a mirror reflecting our own struggles for justice, dignity, and freedom. Perhaps the most striking lesson lies in the way Wallace's story was told and retold. For centuries, it was the ballads, the oral histories, and later the works of poets and playwrights that ensured his spirit would never die. His story was passed from generation to generation, growing into a symbol larger than any king or empire. It became a rallying cry, not just for Scots, but for anyone who has ever faced tyranny. In the end, the execution that was meant to break him only made him immortal. It reminds us that history is not just written by victors, it is shaped by those who refuse to be silenced. So, was Edward's reign a lesson in power's cruelty? Or a warning about the unpredictable strength of resistance? But in the end, whose story truly endured, Edward's or Wallace's? Tell me what you think. Write it in the comments.